Final step of the mold tooling demo then is to show draft. So you want to make sure you go to the completed folder. This is a more complete version of the mold. We just kind of touched on the highlights during the demo, and now here's the completed mold. And we just have a top view with a section line already created, and so you want to create a section view from that section line, that cutting plane we call it. And you place it on the first sheet, but then you're going to go in and actually move it to the sheet there at the bottom. You see we have a tab called section, and that's what we're going to move it to. So you just go to the properties, and on the general tab you can choose which sheet to put it on. Put on that section sheet. Now, section views typically don't have hidden lines, so you'll go into the properties for that view, and you want to go to the display tab, and you're going to be turning off the hidden line display. You can apply that and see the change. And typically you also do not section pins. So you see we have our cam pin in the slide, and we also have a core pin, or the insert that we added earlier. And so we just want to go into the you're going to expand the parting zone, and down into the parting zone you'll find the metric slide, and in there you'll find the cam pin, and you just turn off the section. You just uncheck it. The little glasses gives us a highlight on the screen of which part we're talking about. And you also want to find the insert that's inside of that parting zone, and again you just want to uncheck the sectioning. You can see it highlights there. And once you have that turned off, and then you want to update the view, and you'll see the section lines will be removed from those two components. So the next step that we're going to do in our draft, or in our drawing here, is to add a parts list. So when we start the parts list command, in the drop down list you should have an entry for the mold. If you don't have that entry, it's because you didn't copy the draft list.txt file, or run the setup properly. Just place the parts list right on top of the existing view, and go into the properties, and you want to make sure you get both of the parts lists and move those to the parts list tab. And then when you go to the parts list, it'll be in the middle of the screen. Before we go there, we'll adjust the balloons. You can see we have some balloons crossing, so just show that you can move the balloons around and move the arrows, and have everything update. And then you want to go over to the parts list tab to show the entries there. And you can see the list doesn't look very balanced, so we might go into the properties and change the height of the text list, or the parts list. We'll change that to 200 as the maximum height. We want to add a title. This is the belt cover mold, so add that. You can control the font and the font style and all that, and the text height. Go ahead and apply that. You can see the change there. Another thing that would be good to show is combining cells. Let me just dismiss this so we can zoom in here to see the change. You can see we have all of these parts with a quantity of 4, and we can combine those, or we can merge those quantities if they have the same text or the same value. We're going to center that within that column, and you can see how it combines those that are all 4 and just gives one value. So that shows parts list. The next thing we want to do is actually detail a component, and we're going to pick the slide face. So make sure you're in the completed mold folder, and you want to go to find the slide face. You just type in an S and it will find it, and just drag it in. And by default, Solid Edge will create the 3 common views. And the first thing we want to add is center lines. We're going to use the by 2 lines, so it'll find the the center point between those two lines and add our center line, and then you can just drag the end of the center line out. Notice that when we select that center line, that it actually highlights the two lines that it's associated with. We need to add center marks to all of our circles, and so we can do that actually by a fence selection. We'll find all those circles and add our center mark. And so now we're ready to start dimensioning. You want to show smart dimensioning, that you can pick a line and it gives you a linear dimension. If you pick a radius, you'll get a radial dimension. If you pick a circle, you get a diameter dimension. If you select two lines, you'll get the distance between. And if you select two lines and click the A on the keyboard, you'll get the angle, all with one dimensioning tool. Another thing you want to show is creating a callout to extract the information from the tapped holes that we have in our slide face. So underneath the callout, you can see that we have, under hole callouts, we have specified what we're going to actually define as the hole callout for a tapped hole, thread size, and so on. And so we'll just select that tapped hole, and it will automatically extract that it's an M8 by 20 millimeters deep. And then you want to show creating stacked or baseline dimensions using the distance between dimensions. So if I pick my two circles here, I get a distance between. And notice that depending on my cursor location, I can stack or baseline. In this case, we're baselining. And notice it's not even in the view, but I can still continue to click and it will equally space those baselined dimensions. Run the command again, and this time we'll show stacking the dimensions. You can control the arrow position just by simply selecting the arrow and dragging it to the outside of the lines or the extension lines, and it will automatically flip. And we want to also add a dimension to the first set of holes from the edge. So we'll add that. Notice the extension line is going right through our dimension. That's easily fixed by just selecting the dimension value and dragging it. Notice that it keeps those two aligned with each other. And then we'll of course need the height dimensions as well, and we're going to baseline those. And once again, to move the arrows to the outside, just simply grab the arrowhead and drag it. Very intuitive. Add a couple more smart dimensions. I'm going to add one for the overall length. Now there's a small flat on the face, and we'll just select that flat. And notice that it aligns that dimension as well. And once again, we can create an angular dimension to get the angle of that flat just by selecting the two lines and clicking the A on the keyboard to get the angular dimension. In the top view here, we'll just get the overall width, and we're going to do that by selecting two lines, two edges. Next thing I want to show is creating a detail view. So you just select the command to create the detail view, and you just circle or enclose the area that you want to be added to the detail. If you scroll the mouse wheel, it'll change the scale. And if we go into the properties of that view, we can actually display the scale as well. So you want to go to the annotation or the callout tab here, and you want to turn on the scale. You can see there that it's 10:1. Even though it's 10:1, we don't have to worry about that. Solid Edge knows the real size of those elements. So if we pick that arc, we get the correct value. Or this distance between dimension here, you get the correct value. We need to add that this is a diameter. So you can add diameter symbols, prefixes, and suffixes to our dimensions. And that front face of that is an arc, and you need to go in and clear the prefix, and it automatically knows that that's an arc, so you get a radius value. And the face of the slide is also a big arc, so we'll get the radius value for that as well. Last thing that you may want to add to your drawing is an isometric view of the part for the machinist to have a better understanding of what it looks like. So you just go into principal view, and if you just drag off at an angle, you'll get that isometric view. And before we place it, we're going to change it to a shaded view as well. Now this view can be at a different scale than everything else, so we'll go into the properties of that and we'll change the scale. And we'll just move it down to the corner of the sheet, and we can update that view. And so that wraps up the mold tooling and showing the draft and how to detail the mold components.